The following episode can be viewed on the YouTube channel Bernie or Bust Television.
Good morning, USA, and welcome to another episode of the Bernie or Bust Show. The Empire strikes back. Should we revolt now or merely postpone the inevitable? Here's a Medium article by Julian S. Taylor, The No Bernie Calculus. Fascism now or later? It's become clear that the DNC, the DCCC, and almost all of the media are dead set against a progressive Democratic candidate. For most of us, that means Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren. For me, it doesn't mean Elizabeth Warren. I have to say that I equate Elizabeth Warren with any of the other centrists, even though her lip service is a little bit different. Remembering the contest between Sanders and the swollen pustular ego of Hillary Clinton, we progressives must accept the possibility that Sanders may win the caucuses and primaries and yet be forced out in favor of an Obama-like conservative neoliberal. If we are to vote strategically, what strategy is most likely to yield the best results over the long term? So this guy sounds like an honest-to-goodness Bernie or Buster to me because he's thinking about strategy to yield the best results long term. Clinton finalized NAFTA, which began the wholesale export of U.S. industrial jobs. I myself am struggling with my decision, and it relates very much to my understanding of recent history. Ronald Reagan spent the 80s destroying labor unions, raising taxes on the middle class, and escalating vicious wars in South America. His Republican successor, George H.W. Bush, continued the tradition of war with a pointless invasion of Iraq and Panama and the appointment of one of the first of the modern unqualified Supreme Court justices. Then the Democratic Party provided Bill Clinton. Finally, a president who could restore the power of labor and reconstruct the safety net for the poor. I remember thinking that. I remember voting for Bill Clinton with that very thought in mind. Once elected, we found that Clinton basically agreed with the Republicans on most economic and military issues. While the Republican organization continued its assault on labor and civil rights, Clinton finalized NAFTA, which began the wholesale export of U.S. industrial jobs. He assured us that the era of big government is over and that the poor would be burdened as never before while corporations could continue to form monopolies and corner markets, assuring higher prices for medicine and continued low taxes for the exceedingly rich. He tested and inadvertently proved certain tenets of modern monetary theory, leading to the dot-com boom and bust. In essence, Clinton simply held the Republican project stable so that George W. Bush could pick up where the previous Republicans had left off. With W's administration came more pointless wars. His economic policies were primarily tied to the existing Republican market-based tropes. There was more legislation hurting labor and invading individual privacy, beginning the now ongoing continual monitoring of individual actions so as to better sell us useless crap and keep the Secret Service apprised of our actions. Finally, thank all that is holy, the Democratic Party offered us Barack Obama. Now we could vote for someone who would restore workers' rights and advocate for benevolent programs for the poor. We would be able to impeach the incompetent federal judges and outlaw gerrymandering. What we got was the ACA, which was a boon to well-prepared insurance companies. It was certainly better than nothing, but offered only Medicaid as a non-commercial option, and that was dependent upon the cooperation of each state to implement. The result was very spotty coverage and a fragile infrastructure begging for gradual deconstruction. Those states that refused to fully implement the ACA became key hotbeds for the Trump revolution. Obama's admitted conservatism led him to seek constantly to cooperate with the Republicans as if they were a legitimate political party. He pre-compromised most of his proposals and accepted Republican initiatives as if they were intended to actually support democratic values. This, of course, is utterly irrational, as I explore in Reading Right to Left. Let me show you that. If you click on the link, you'll get Reading Right to Left. The problem with the right is not that it's wrong. I gave it a cursory look. Feel free to go click on it yourself. It looks pretty interesting. So Obama's admitted conservatism led him to cave in advance to the Republicans. He was definitely controlled opposition. So that's, if you click that link, that's probably what you're going to find. I'm going to check it out later. Just like Clinton, Obama essentially kept secure the America the Republicans had begun to dice up among their rich benefactors. When Trump was elected, the Republicans were able to simply pick up where they left off, further corrupting the government, subverting the rule of law, and assuring continued expansion of monopolies and outright theft of the public trust. So now we come to this juncture. What do progressives do if the Democratic Party and the cooperative media quash Sanders' bid and insert a conservative neoliberal as our only practical alternative to Trump? What is our best choice? In such a case, progressives have two options. Number one, vote for Trump and ensure that the fascist state consolidates in a timely fashion, prompting its eventual overthrow in the traditional bloody revolution. I can't tell if his tongue is in his cheek, but I think it isn't. I think he really thinks that there's going to be a traditional bloody revolution. Number two, vote for the conservative Democrat who, consistent with Democratic Party tradition, will simply delay the revolution by 4 years. Do I want the fascist consolidation now or 4 years from now under President Nugent? Of course, rather than vote for Trump, we could vote for a third-party candidate, yielding the same result but with less guilt. The choice is irrelevant. With the cooperation of the Democratic Party, we could easily elect a real progressive president and Congress. Given that, we could stand a chance at making gerrymandering illegal. We could impeach scores of incompetent federal judges, we could start massive infrastructure restoration projects, and we could begin to expose and invalidate the corrupt practices the Republican organization has so effectively normalized. A constitutional amendment codifying ranked choice voting for the president could promote third-party candidates to that office. That could drive more states to adopt ranked choice, promoting a multi-party environment leading to rational coalitions supporting well-reasoned legislation better isolated from corporate control. A progressive could vote with true hopefulness for Bernie or, in a pinch, Warren. No, don't vote for Warren under any circumstances. And certainly do not urge Bernie to choose her as his vice president. Back to the story. But if I'm presented with Klobuchar or Buttigieg, I'm going to be engaging in a very different calculus. Do I want the fascist consolidation now or 4 years from now under President Nugent? Because Elizabeth has dropped out too, what we've got is a two-person race finally. So what you have to decide is Biden or President Nugent. If those are my two choices, I'm really thinking we should just get it over with. Why wouldn't I vote for the Green candidate and gird my loins for the inevitable glorious revolution? My septuagenarian friends and I will join in the battle at the Koch Memorial Constitutional Convention. The common people will elbow their way into the hall, spilling the occasional ounce of rich blue blood from the noses of their oppressors, and overtake the assembly to craft a constitution that will be the envy of the most pampered Swede. His tongue is a little bit in his cheek there, I think. Maybe. Anyone who doesn't recognize our current administration as fascism, a political system wherein a dictatorial ruler not subject to law joins with commercial interests to assure his own personal advancement using nationalism and racism to stabilize his control, that's a pretty good definition, should look up the word in a modern dictionary. The Democratic Party has demonstrated its unquestioned bona fides as the Republican organization's personal pup, a mere valuable distraction from the ongoing Republican machinations. How can this useful idiot possibly be my party? With the acceptance of the facts on the ground as I see them, I must conclude that without a progressive choice, these are my only options: fascism now or fascism later. Perhaps human beings are truly incompetent. Perhaps we are simply not qualified to govern ourselves. Maybe we actually require a dictator and a domestic military force to properly order our lives. Surely providing unlimited power and wealth to a glorious leader and his friends is a small price to pay for security and oblivious, guiltless existence while, mostly unobserved, the world burns around us. Simply following orders and reveling in the approval of our masters should be sufficient reward for a life of worthy servitude. No, this must not be the case. Better to perish in the service of the human soul rather than as a pedestal for unfettered power. The fascists ruled Italy for about 15 years, at which point they were overthrown, shot, and suspended upside down by ropes from the roof of a gas station. Sounds good to me. If that is a fair guess at the longevity of a fascist regime, I may actually be laid to permanent rest in a renewed democratic socialist state. If the conservative Democrat, insert Joe Biden, holds everything in stasis for 4 or God forbid 8 years, I will undoubtedly die a fascist tool. If my choice is to die a stooge or an agent of revolution, I think my decision is clear. I am sick to death of voting reluctantly for ineffective holding actions. Bill Clinton, John Kerry, Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton. This time I'm not falling for that subterfuge. This time I'm voting for progressive change or immediate fascist collapse and the violent revolt that allocates all fascists their well-deserved ignoble end. Here's Tim Black skewering people who well deserve to be skewered.
Here's the thing. I didn't include it in the clip, but I got to add this, guys, because you need to know it, okay? Hillary Rosen was announcing, you heard Cuomo say, thank you for announcing it on my show. I don't know if you heard that or not. But anyway,
Hillary Rosen is a Biden surrogate who was laying into Nina Turner, and Tim is skewering her, but he's also skewering some other people that it may surprise you. If you know Tim Black, it won't surprise you.
She announces that she is supporting Joe Biden. Yeah, she's a CNN contributor who's announcing that she's, supports Joe Biden there. So here's the thing, guys. I blame Jim Clyburn.
Aha!
That's right, I blame Jim Clyburn. I blame Jim Clyburn because it is Jim Clyburn that gave Joe Biden a pass he did not deserve.
Yep.
It's the Jim Clyburns who give Joe Biden a license for him and his surrogates to pretend all of a sudden him black. No matter how cool I am with Asian folks, I never think I'm cool enough to be telling Asians what their standing is or if they have a right to quote someone like Confucius or, I don't know, a Shang Tzu or whatever the hell. Like, who am I? Who am I to do something like that? Who would give me the right to tell Asian folks from whatever, whether you're Korean or Japanese or Chinese or Taiwanese or Filipino or whatever? Who am I as a black man with no true understanding of your culture, no entry into your culture to tell you about your history, about your pain, about your burdens, about your struggles? I would never do that. But white folks do. White folks like Hillary Rosen, and they get a license to do it by people like Jim Clyburn. Clyburn, you might as well did this yourself. You put a battery pack in Joe Biden's back as if he done did so much for black folks. We know Joe. We know Joe. Hey, we know Joe when he was supporting Jim Crow. Did you know Joe then? What about Joe when he was Jim Crow Joe? What about that part? Oh, we just gonna not know Joe then. We know Joe now. We know Joe since he been with Obama. And Obama only got Joe so he could get racist white people to vote for him. Come on, Clyburn, if I know that, I know you know that. So, Jim, you sold us out, man. And, unlike me not being able to say it when Obama was doing it, because at the time I was still enamored by Obama. I didn't know he was blowing smoke up my ass.
Me too.
But Jim Clyburn, I know. And I'm doing this in real time for you. I'm not going to wait till Joe Biden and whatever's happening with Joe Biden later on to come out and say, well, Jim Clyburn was wrong. Looking back at history, I can see how Jim Clyburn really did us dirty. No, I want to do this shit in real time. I want to be able to come out right now in front of the whole world and say, you sold us out. That's what you did. And now you give these guys a mandate. You gave Joe Biden a mandate to pretend his long, disgusting, stupid, ignorant ass, condescending stories about black people was acceptable. To black people. It ain't acceptable for me to listen to Joe Biden talk about black girls touching his stinky ass, hairy ass legs at the pool. Do you think a black man can get away with telling that story, Jim? Can a black man get away in 2020 with telling the story of being at a pool and some white kids rubbing his hairy legs? No, he couldn't. They call him a pervert. But no, Jim Clyburn gives Joe Biden a pass. Oh, we know Joe. I know Joe. And my wife, I don't get, look, God bless you. God bless your wife. but you don't get a license to throw us under the bus with this sharecropping, supporting, segregationist, blowhard, Iraq voting, bad policy, indoctrinating, signing, creating piece of scum dirt. To the black mothers and the black grandmothers and the black men that you told go vote for Joe, do they know Joe was talking about cutting their Social Security?
Yeah.
Did you keep it real with them, Jim?
Nope.
Did you tell them that's what Joe Biden was talking about? Did you admit, did you tell them that? Or did you just gloss over it? Or suddenly you forget what time it is? Or suddenly you misremember? And don't tell me it was 20 years ago either. I don't care when it was. It shows a proclivity to be malleable to the establishment and go against the will of the people. As if people back in the 80s, when he said it, didn't need their Social Security. As if that wasn't a thing. As if Medicare and Medicaid weren't important to the people that were receiving it back then. So what makes it different now? What makes it different now? I blame Clyburn and all the other Clyburns. I blame Clyburn for giving Joe Biden the pass, thus putting a battery in the backs of Joe Biden to think he got license to talk when he doesn't. This woman, Hillary Rosen, thinks she got a license to tell a black woman what she can and cannot stand on, what she has a standing to do. And it goes all the way to Bloomberg, all the way up to Rooter to the Tutor, to those people who would gladly take a check from Bloomberg and chin check us.
He's talking there about the Black Caucus leaders who took checks from Bloomberg to support Bloomberg. Ashley Stevens, the acumen. Let me be very clear. My black ass is never voting for a segregationist that wrote the crime bill, voted for Iraq, made it harder to get rid of student loans, and treated Anita Hill like shit to save you from Trump. Fuck you if you think so. It ain't happening.
Tomorrow's Superstar Tuesday, and I want to thank you all. We hold these truths to be self-evident. All men and women created by you know the thing.
Why should the voters believe that you can win the national election?
It's a good question. Number one, I was a Democratic caucus. Ever been to a caucus? No, you haven't. You're a lying dog-faced pony soldier. You said you were, but you're...
No one has said my son has done anything wrong, and I did not on any occasion. And no one has ever said it. Not one day you were doing anything wrong. You said I set up my son to work in an oil company. Isn't that what you said? Get your words straight, Jack.
That's what I hear on MSNBC.
You don't hear that on MSNBC. You did not hear that. But you heard. Look, okay, I'm not going to get in an argument with you, man. Well, yeah, you do, but look, here's the deal. Here's the deal.
It looks like you don't have any more back over in Trump.
150 million people have been killed since 2007. My name is Joe Biden. I'm a Democratic candidate for the United States Senate. Look me over if you'd like to see help out. If you agree with me, go to Joe 30330. We choose truth over facts. Play the radio. Make sure the television, make sure you have the record player on at night. The phone. Make sure the kids hear words. Poor kids are just as bright and just as talented as white kids. His mom lived in Long Island for 10 years or so. God rest her soul. And although your mom's still alive as your dad passed. God bless her soul. Chuck Graham, state senator's here. Chuck, stand up, Chuck. Let him see you. Oh, God love you. What am I talking about? A man who will be the next president of the United States, Barack America.
Delaware, the largest growth in population is Indian Americans moving from India. You cannot go to a 7-Eleven or a Dunkin' Donuts unless you have a slight Indian accent. I'm not joking. Are you bored yet?
You say goodbye to me.
Isn't it kind of boring? See
All
you,
right.
beautiful child.
All right,
Just
guys.
remember, no dates or boys till you're 30 years old.
Time to wrap it up, Jacob.
I got 4 granddaughters.
beautiful granddaughters like you guys. And guess what? The granddaughter guys look at the family name. I said, anything this time around you want to do? And my oldest is Attorney General, both, you know. Okay. Watch out, that guy following you. My kids. The problem is, you know, you guys, you got a hard job.
Dad's gonna stand pretty close.
Okay, here we go. Is it in your way?
We're going to exit out this way.
I hope you...
We're just going to take this one photo right now, and then
Okay. Don't tell me what name No, not smile. No date till you're 30. You should be proud of me. This one.
Thank you. Maggie, do you want to come over here?
Come on, man. Make me look better. There we go.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Well, nice to see you guys. Over here. Okay? Which way? Come on, Jill, Nan, you get on this side. I'll be darned. What a beautiful family. Well, you got to be very patient. Fathers are hard to raise. You know what I mean? All right, it's hard, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Here to say yeah. So nice to meet you. How are you? You guys get ready to move. Come on. There you go. You can stand up. That's okay. You got it? Hey? Well, we got everybody. Congratulations. And girls, remember, no dates till you're 30 years old.
I know, you gave her a champ dog and she still keeps it on her nose.
You still that champ dog? Yeah, you got it? Okay.
And if you want the back, you can spread out a little bit.
Everybody else is looking forward to it.
My daughter. She couldn't make it. What's her name? We'll turn around here. We'll get a good picture. Mom, I don't want to block you.
All right, so we'll
Right over here. There we go. You can put it away. Yes, I don't know. It was wonderful. My mom loved it.
Okay, got some more family people. Come on in. You know, we got a crowd. Sure.
Okay.
Come on, get over there, Mary Lyle. What are you, a senior? See up there? Oh, way up there. Right here. Look up there. What my dad used to say, your granddaughter said, one important girl. Take care of the clock. Madam Secretary, whatever you say.
Thank you so much.
Get on board the Bernier bus train. Come get on board the Bernier bus train. Once you hear that clickety-clack, there ain't no time for turning back. Oh, get on board the Bernier bus train.
The preceding episode can be viewed on the YouTube channel Bernie or Bust Television.